everyone. We have Matthew Cintron-Quiñones today. Hi Matthew.
Hi, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world.
Good morning to you and thank you for making time for this interview.
Very excited to be here. Thank you.
I know that you are a mentor coach. I've worked with you as a mentor and your LinkedIn profile says you're an executive coach for Latinos. Tell me more about it. Something that I can't find on the LinkedIn about you.
Oh my, that's a great question. Well, I don't know if it's actually still on my LinkedIn profile, so this one may or may not be. This may or may not answer your question, but one of my excuse me, one of my favorite animals is the panda bear. And once upon a time, I went to China for the sole purpose of going to a panda reservation area. And I spent a whole day volunteering with them. I fed them, I cleaned after them. And the best part was I paid a little extra. No one needs to know how much extra, it was a lot. And they were able to basically put a baby panda right next to me and it crawled into my arms. And so I have gotten to many people in my life have known that I love the panda bear. And there was an ongoing joke, or maybe you might call it, and they would ask me, Matthew, when are you going to go hug a panda bear? And I decided, let's find out how. And so I did it. So there's actually a YouTube video of me hugging a panda bear. So that's how committed I was to finding one that would hug me back.
Wow, that's so adorable. And no wonder it became your brand later on. I see that your coaching is after the panda bear, right?
It
Syndrome.
is.
And, of so many mentors that I've worked with, I really enjoyed working with you. You have this way of giving positive feedback, yet making it effective. How do you manage to do that?
Oh, yeah, it's a constant thing on my mind because I really want people to feel empowered and to keep going. And that can be really hard sometimes when the feedback, when whatever they sent to me wasn't their best work. And so I do think it's important that I emphasize what really went well. And I also try and add my experience into it. So I am, I've worked with lots of different coaches at this point. I've done a variety of different trainings. And so I've gotten a sense of which coaching skills are fairly easy for most people and then which ones are more difficult. I myself am on my MCC journey. And so there's been some skills in those in that journey that have been pretty challenging for me. So whenever I see one of those strengths, then I really want the person to know that it's a strength in my perspective, and not because I want to give them a strength, because I want them to know that it is really something unique, and there are things that other folks really struggle with that they, to me, it seems like they're doing naturally. So I think that's really important to me. And I also think one of my mentors uses the phrase enabling the feedback to be heard, and that's really important to me as well. So it's also about learning their communication style, learning how they prefer to receive information. And so I really try and accommodate that, as well as adding humor. I like to believe humor is mostly universal. And so if I can offer a slightly exaggerated metaphor or comparison to what happened in the session and give that as feedback, then I'm certainly going to do that. And it seems to work really well. I'd be interested in knowing what your perspective is on how you have received my feedback and what inspired you to ask that question.
There have been a lot of areas of improvement for me, which you have brought in a positive light. I don't know how you do it. Maybe highlighting the my strengths first and going beyond. Because I've heard the same feedback from others, and it has kind of discouraged me. Whereas when I heard it from you, I was motivated to work on it and overcome whatever feedback was there. So that I think was thought was amazing.
And when you say that, I think that reminds me of another thing that I really try and do, and that's to present the feedback objectively. It's not my personal opinion. I'm just stating the facts, and I'm not sure how that might help sometimes. So I never want to say, Archana, you did this wrong and this wasn't good. And it's very personal about you. And I don't want it to make it about you. I want to talk about the skills that were demonstrated. And so I typically say things very factual. Like, for example, the sky is blue. So I'd be like, the coach said this, and this is an example of this, or it's not an example of this. Consider this, therefore this will happen. So that is one thing that I know that I've really tried hard is to be really objective and not insert my opinion. I might offer that in a verbal debrief, but certainly when it comes to writing things down, I'm just there to list the facts and I offer alternative approaches to really help the person.
Yeah, yeah, that resonates with me a lot because I've been studying about brain science, and the moment emotions get involved, you kind of close your thinking brain. So it stop taking once you're offended. So maybe that is
Mhm.
why remaining objective works, because you're taking the emotion off and keeping it very straight to the point.
Mm, thank you for that. That's a great insight.
For the aspiring coaches who are ACCs, when you were in that stage, what were you doing and how did you progress?
That's a wonderful question. Where do I start? Well, initially, my journey was a little bit back and forth. So first I wanted this, and then I wanted this, and then I went back to this. And so when I began my coaching journey, I really wanted to go for the PCC right away. So the ACC was never on my mind. I didn't really think about it at all. And then the opportunity came about where I was able to apply for the ACC, and I decided to let's go ahead and do that. So in that journey, I had to go out and get my own mentor coach and prepare a recording. And I really did not want to submit a recording to ICF. I really did not. Um, I was afraid of being judged, but for some reason, I wasn't afraid of being judged when it came to my coaching program. Looking back, I don't really know what was going on with my thoughts back then. Um, so yeah, so I got a mentor coach, and so I think she really set the foundation for the way that I perceive mentor coaching as being really effective. I would send her a recording and a transcript, and she would provide me a written up feedback using um I think at the time, the ACC standards, the minimum skills requirements. And so I always left every mentor session with like a PDF of notes and from the mentor herself. And so that was really integral in my journey, not only to get an ACC passing recording, but to also improve my skills otherwise. And so for instance, the better that I got at being silent, the more my listening increased. The the more that I practiced shorter questions, the more I was able to then um, just speak more succinctly and say similar messages with long words, but or long phrases in a shorter way. So it really had a compounding effect of you do one thing better, then other things get better. And so in that journey, I ended up applying for my ACC, and then I decided not to apply for. I actually withdrew my application because I was able to then apply for the PCC with what's now called a level 2 certificate. And so basically did mentor coaching. I don't want to say it wasn't for a purpose. It wasn't my original purpose. And so that experience just really helped me get my skills better. And then I felt confident in my level 2 program. So that's really the journey from the skills perspective. Originally, I went for a different coaching credential from another organization, another crediting body, and I had a really hard time with their exam. And so in between that and then learning about ICF, I kept changing my mind and trying out different things. And so really the journey for me ended up just being what makes the most sense for me and what do I really want to do. I tried to keep it pragmatic, for instance, doing a level 2 program, having all my requirements ticked off, and then I can, do things more for fun, so to speak. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that was the heart of the journey was just I really love learning. And so what stood out to me that I wanted to do, and then I just kept doing it. And like I said, in my own mentor coaching journey, any chance that I got to send someone a recording was really important to me. With that said, I also felt very similar to my mentees that I work with now. It's embarrassing sometimes when your mentor points something out that you didn't do very well. It's vulnerable to share your work with someone, especially when you know the session wasn't great and you promised your mentor to have a recording like in 24 hours, and the best thing you can send to them is really not good at all. Um, and so I think that would describe the journey. It was a lot of learning and making mistakes, but getting a lot of feedback. Does that answer your question? I actually kind of forgot the multiple questions, but that was certainly the broad journey.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, how did PCC mentoring and now MCC, they all came together? What's the chronological order of them?
Yeah. Well, after I got my PCC, I mean, I wanted to rest. I mean, I really, really got my 500 hours quite quickly. And then a very nice woman messaged me on LinkedIn and said, "We're beginning a new level 3 program." This is when they announced those programs. Would you like to join? And I thought, I just got my PCC. And then I thought, I mean, I guess I might as well start practicing MCC skills now. And so then I began a level 3 program, and then I just started to see how can I amplify my skills to the MCC level. And that was just really a that really just evolved beyond like, all right, what's the next step for me? And it was a really great point to consider. When do I decide when the next thing is? Do I wait until I have my 2,500 hours? And I've later learned most people don't recommend that. They recommend getting MCC mentor coaching really as soon as you can. And so I started off with that level 3 program, and then I learned about different group offerings. I actually began doing reciprocoach. They have mentor coaching rounds for MCC candidates, and so I began doing those. I met some mentors there who then I went on to learn from. And so it really was it just kept evolving, kind of like a tree. You start here, and then it leads to a couple branches, and then those branches lead to more branches. And so, yeah, I just really got to meet a lot of new people in terms of MCC mentors and really just keep the learning going. I think at this point, I've completely exceeded what I need for MCC mentor coaching. It's a minimum of 10 hours. I think last time I checked, I might be over 100 at this point. Um, and that's also what speaks to me is it's not so much about a credential, it's really about the learning and how can I continue to provide the best value for my clients and along the way do a really, really strong MCC recorded call. Still working on that, but we're getting there.
Yeah. And where did mentor coaching come into the picture?
Well, it was part of the like me as a mentor coach or receiving it.
You as a mentor coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed receiving mentor coaching so much that I knew right away that I wanted to deliver it. And that was part of the reason why I decided to get my initial 500 client hours and skip the ACC, because I wanted the PCC to then be able to mentor coach people. So part of it was I really enjoyed it. I thought it, to me, it's one of the most important things that you can do in your coaching development experience broadly. Have someone else look at your coaching and tell you what can be improved and also what's going really well. And I also came from a background working at universities, and so my job in different departments was assessing how undergraduate students were learning, what they're learning, to what degree are they competent in it. And there was a lot of alignment with the mentor coaching experience. And so I instantly saw that alignment and I really wanted to get into it. And so I realized the way that I think made me a really sharp mentor coach to be able to point out competencies, to be able to explain them. And so it just felt like a really natural fit. And once I knew that fit was there for me, then I just really went for it. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, it feels really good to be a mentor coach. It feels really good to receive quality mentor coaching. I've unfortunately been on the other side of receiving not great mentor coaching, and so I'm really driven to be a mentor coach in the world that provides a good experience, the best that I can.
Mm. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I've also experienced both of them. So I also saw you being meticulous and almost perfectionist with all the competencies, hands on with them. Where do you get that from, to be on top of all the competencies to the point?
Wow, that's a great question. It's not something I tried. It really isn't. It just kind of happened. Um, you know, it- yeah. And so for instance, a few years ago I went to Russia and of course they use the Cyrillic alphabet. And every now and then I would start to pick up on what a letter meant. I'm like, oh, that's what that means. And so without really trying, just being exposed to it so much, I was able to pick up the Cyrillic alphabet. So I can pronounce any word more or less that's written in Cyrillic, which is to me really fascinating. And mentor coaching was very much the same way in the competency base. I was using them so much that I just began to understand them. I began to know them, from a quantitative perspective. I could recite the numbers, I could tell you where to find them. And then when it came to the definitions and the quality, that just came from a lot of reading and experience and practicing. Um, but I think, yeah, it might just be the way my brain is wired. It's not something I actively try. I mean, I see this in video games as well. If I'm looking for certain hidden things and I play the game again, honestly, I'll remember where things were from years ago. I'm like, oh, I know I have to go down this pathway. It's really fascinating. I don't know what it is that just keeps me attached to that content, but I just don't forget it.
And also tell me a little about your travel. Learned I love traveling, and I saw that you took a sabbatical for travel. Anything that you would like to share about that?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I After I got my master's degree, I decided to celebrate and I went to Australia and New Zealand, and that was a really fun vacation, adventure, exploration. And then I actually I graduated with my master's degree a few months early than expected. It was kind of an accident. And so I kind of justified to myself, well, it's currently January. I'm not supposed to graduate until May. So let's just have some fun and keep traveling. And so it felt like the right time. And so I think my justification was is I'm single, I don't have any kids, and I often hear about friends and colleagues who they do all that traveling when they're older and their kids are grown up. And to me, I thought, let's just do it now. And this is before there was a global pandemic, and so I'm very grateful I did. But if there was something that came across my mind or I wanted to see something, then I made it happen. And so I spent nearly all of 2017 traveling internationally. It was only going to be those first few months, January to May, and then I actually got a job offer to work in the UK. The slight caveat was the job offer wasn't going to begin until the next calendar year. So this happened about March, and so I had 9 months to fill up with something. So I had two options. Number one was to have a child, which I didn't want to do for 9 months. I mean, not me, I'd find someone to have that child, or I could just keep traveling. And so I chose to keep traveling. Probably just as expensive, but I just went all over. I went to, Cuba, which is really hard for Americans, especially nowadays. I went to South America, Southeast Asia, all around Europe. And then I moved abroad for six months, did another month of traveling, and then I came back to the US and I tried to figure out, gosh, what do I do now? And then it took me about a year until coaching came into the picture. Um, but yeah, travel was just something that really, it started off when I was in college and I did study abroad. And I was a really shy kid, very shy. And once I got myself into traveling, I mean, I felt that I could conquer anything. It was a really empowering experience of self-confidence. And so once I was able to have the room to do that, then I kept doing it. And as I'm saying this, it's very similar to mentor coaching. Once I had it the first time, it was so enjoyable. I just kept going for it until I ran out of money. That's how travel stopped, or a global pandemic. But as of now, there is no pandemic that's involved in mentor coaching.
Yeah. And when did you choose to shift consciously into coaching? Uh, like you said, you were working in a university. What made that switch for you to switch into coaching?
After I came back from the United States, after all that traveling, I got a job as a study abroad advisor, and I got fired after 29 days. It wasn't even a month, and my self-esteem was destroyed. So I spent that whole calendar year trying to figure out what in the world do I do next. And I came across a job that was only part-time, and it was focused on helping students learn, which is what I've always loved that aspect. And there was a part of something called academic coaching. And I think I remembered from graduate school and different studies, whenever I was learning about leadership, it always seemed like the number one like leadership method was the coaching approach. So I decided to let's go ahead and try that. And then so first it was part of my job, and I got to coach a lot of students and I got to train other coaches. This was before I even knew about the whole world out there. And when that contract ended, mainly because of the pandemic, I was really sad and I thought, I don't really want to stop doing this. What else is out there? And so I went on Google and then I learned about this whole different universe and I decided let's keep doing it. And so I had a few other jobs along the way, but overall coaching essentially came in, it just was in front of me. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. Um, and here I am today. So I distinctly remember it was the autumn or fall of 2020. No, that's not. We're not there yet. 2017, not 27. 2017. I was interviewing someone for a graduate school paper, and she told me her leadership style was the coaching approach. So that moment always stuck in my head. I bought a couple coaching books. I never read them until recently. But it just started with just that little itty bitty moment, and then it just kept evolving based on different work experiences.
Wonderful. And I've heard you say about how people learn. In a nutshell, if you have to tell me what have you learned about how people learn, what would you say?
Although there are different learning styles, auditory, kinesthetic, and or just all that's good stuff. I think people learn by doing. People really learn by by the information they have and doing something with it. And so constant repetition, constant practice. So to me, that's what I think is really important. And I think it's really prevalent in coaching. So when you learn something, you've got to do something with it. If it's just a fun fact that you're not going to use, you're probably going to forget it. And so, like Nike said,
Just do it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it because even with coaching, right, unless you experiment it on the client, whatever you've learned, it's all in the head.
Hmm.
You've got to do it repetitively. Wonderful. And we're almost at the end of the session. Any transformation story that you've experienced which has touched your heart through coaching or mentoring?
There's many. Yeah, I think there's many. I can briefly share too. I think with coaching, I had a client who was very focused on his team members, and he didn't understand why they didn't want to work beyond their standard US business week of 40 hours a week. And he kept asking me, what do I do? What do I do to motivate them? Because I want them to get higher pay and promotions. And I think the transformation with him was really clearly not everybody is motivated by money, and not everybody wants a big fancy promotion. They're not always going up and up. And so I think that was a big transformation to him. It was really focused on him realizing this is what I want from my team members, but we helped to focus him on what do the team members want for themselves and how can you help them get there. And watching him evolve was really just it was outstanding. It took a lot of stress off of him, which was of course wonderful, and he was a better manager, and so he felt more confident because he wasn't trying to fix something that didn't need to be fixed. So that would be my coaching example. When it comes to mentor coaching, I'm not sure if I can think of a one particular. No, that's a lie. Just kidding. There is. I worked with someone who graduated coaching school 5 years ago, and she never submitted a recording for evaluation. In those 5 years, I don't believe she practiced any coaching. So we were able to connect, and I mean, it was challenging. We're going from, as I mentioned, if you're not going to practice it, you're going to forget it. And so, in general, the evolution working with her, it took us about 6 months or so, but she kept trying and going and going and practicing skills and really getting to that space of where she could really coach in a natural, authentic self in a way that an assessor or an evaluator could understand. So I think that was the greatest transformation that I've seen with mentor coaching. Um, I mean, it's pretty challenging to try and remember something you did 5 years ago if you don't review it at all in that 5 years.
Mm, that's true. I think that's the power of coaching and mentoring. Coaching specifically, that's why we all are here. We love those moments of aha moments and transformations, and that is what keeps us going in coaching. So,
Mhm.
thank you so much for sharing your insights and story. I'm sure it'll be inspirational for many like me. And
Mhm.
on the ending note, do you have to say anything? Uh,
Yeah, I would say that anyone who's working on getting a recording in for evaluation or a credential or really any purpose, just keep going. It's normal to not have your first or second or even third recording meet the standards. It's normal that it's going to take multiple tries until you get one that feels most like you and also one that meets the requirements it has to meet. And so really don't give up. There is something magical about coaching and the bond with the coach and the client that the more you keep practicing, the better that gets. And soon enough, you will get a recording that's going to demonstrate the best of all of you. And it may seem like it's never going to happen, but as long as you keep trying, I promise you it's going to happen.
yeah, I can totally second that. I was so demotivated with multi levels, and finally, I got a very good one.
A very good one, absolutely.
Yeah, so I can totally relate to that. And thanks again, Matthew, for being on the show with me. And
Thank
hope
you for having me.
I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Bye bye.